Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of Web Up. Today, I'm your host, Carl Mugazi, and I'm joined by Paige.
Hey, everybody.
TJ.
Hey, everyone.
And our guest today is Elizabet Oliviera.
Hello, everyone.
Early in my career, I figured out which jobs were worth working at and which ones weren't, mostly by trial and error. I created a system that I used to find jobs and later contracts as a freelancer. If you're looking for a job or trying to figure out where you should go next, then check out my book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. The book walks you through figuring out what you want, vetting companies that meet your criteria, meeting that company's employees, and getting them to recommend you for a job. Don't settle for whoever has listed their job on the job board. Go out and proactively find the job you'll love. Buy the book at devchat.tv/jobbook. That's devchat.tv/jobbook.
Could you give us an intro about yourself, who you are, and how you got your into coding?
Yes, so my name is Elizabet Oliviera. I was born in Mozambique, and my father is Portuguese, my mother from Mozambique. So when I was like 2 years old, I moved to Lisbon. And my family was always creative. I don't think we were born like with skills for music or these things, but we are always doing like entertainment, let's say. So I remember that my father once bought like a Spectrum, a computer, and we start like playing games. And then we had like a Mega Drive and the Nintendo. And I always liked consoles and games and this type of technology. But I never thought that I could be a developer or designer because when I went to school, all the classes for related with technology were only like men. So I never thought I could be something related. So I ended up like going to science. I wanted to do something related maybe with medicine but when I finished the secondary school, I was a little bit lost and I ended up like going to cinema. So it was nothing like related, but I only stayed 1 year and I quit. So I was totally lost. And then I ended up going to an events course and related with tourism. I finished, I did like the 3 years, I got the bachelor. And after that, that's when I started realizing that I was good like doing design and development.
Awesome. So today you'll kind of talk to us about React and SVGs. So as a starting point, what is it that you want to talk to us about React and SVGs and how we can use them in our day-to-day work?
Yes, so I always, because I consider myself more like a designer than a developer, every development things that I do, it's more because I want to achieve a design. So I basically learned to code because I didn't have like someone to help me and I wanted to build things. So I ended up like having to code. One day I just realized that SVGs is a really easy way to translate the design to code. So with CSS, you basically have to, let's say like I have a project called cassette tape. And if I had to do that with CSS, will take some time, like to put the wheels in the right position, to put the play and pause buttons in the right position. And with the SVG, you just like create with Sketch or Figma. And then when you put it in the browser, it's already everything in the right position. And you can then just interact with JavaScript. So I kind of start like when I found about SVGs like a few years ago, I started like realizing, oh, this is awesome. We can create really good things with this. And that's when I start like using it.
So I'm very curious, as someone that has first of all, your life story is at least 1,000 times more interesting than mine. I've lived a fairly mundane existence. I also have almost no design talent. So let's say I wanted to get in and create some SVGs. What would you say is like the easiest path for someone that's completely new to this? Like you mentioned Sketch, like what is like the easiest steps for me to create like a really simple SVG if I wanted to try this out?
Yeah, I think the easiest way, and I think in one talk of Sarah Drasner, she told that you don't need to have like design skills because you already have a lot of resources. So if you go to websites like Flat Icon, or there's a few websites where you can download SVGs and for free. And then maybe you can just imagine that you want to create, I don't know, like a forest. maybe you can go to this website and you grab the trees and you can grab a sun and you start just putting all the pieces together with Sketch or Figma. I think Figma will be easier because you can do it on the browser and it's free. And then you can just start exporting let's say the artboard that you created. And then you can, if you open with the code editor, you will see that everything is already like in code.
Do you have any tips or tricks that you've learned for working successfully with SVGs in React? Because I've had some issues in the past of either importing them and getting them to show up or having to do some special Webpack configurations. So if you've got any advice there, I'd love to hear it.
I think the first thing is what you're going to do with the SVG. If I'm going to animate the SVG, and actually if you use a tool like Figma, by default, when you export it, it will remove the IDs. So when you're exporting, you have to specifically say, I want to keep the IDs. And so it's something, if I'm going just to have like an icon or to export an icon, I will try to minify and optimize. So I don't need the IDs, and I just wanted to have the most, with the best optimization possible. Mm-hmm. But if I want to animate it, I need to know what is what. So the only way that I can see that is if I keep the IDs. So let's say that I have that cassette tape. I have to write, okay, this is the play button, this is the pause button. And the only way then when I'm opening with the editor to see what is to keep that IDs.
One thing I've struggled about with SVGs is understanding how to use the path, for example, in SVGs, and then you've got all the other kind of attributes. So how best can you actually learn what those mean and how to maybe get the right size and the view box? Because that part for me has always confused me, and I've never quite understood how to do that.
Actually, I was like using and creating things with tools like design tools. I kind of understand, okay, that you have to keep to get the best ratio, you have to keep the view box, but I'm not like digging in that way. Like I'm not creating the SVGs just with code. I think it's too difficult. And if someone can do that, really, I think it's a genius. I think maybe like a rectangle or easy. You have like easy shapes, but these shapes like paths and all that numbers that the paths definitions that are generated, I think they're really complex.
So then is your workflow, like if you're working on, you have an SVG imported and you decide you need to make a change to the SVG itself, will you essentially then open like your image editor, whatever that might be, make your change and then like re-import it so that you can test it from there?
It depends. Like I can use a SVGR. You have like SVGR CLI and I can like export from Figma and then run and export the SVGs inside like a project. And then if the project is React, I have like the SVGR there. And basically I create like a script that will run my SVGs and then will transform the SVGs into React components. Or I can do it like manually, and sometimes I actually prefer to do it manually. And the manual process is like I export it. I go to a website as we go. I optimize the SVG. I download the SVG from that website, and then I go to another website and I transform the SVG into React components. But with the SVGR, you can do that, everything, optimize and then transform into a React component.
So I'm curious, I got the SVGR repo up here. Can you explain to me what this is actually doing? Because the extent of everything I've done with SVG is I just import import my file.svg in with React. So like why would I want to make an SVG into an actual React component? Like what additional things does that allow me to do?
Yeah, so when you have like the SVG and it's not a React component, you have like the GSX, you have to, it's almost like the names, like the attributes, like almost like a camel case. So the real SVGs, you have like the dash separating. So if you import that way, or if you don't have like a SVGR in your Webpack configured, when you're importing the SVG, or if you putting the SVG in line, it will give some errors.
Okay.
So the way to fix that errors is search and replace and transform that attributes to JSX. So with SVGR, if you run, if you create your own script, it will automatically. You can even define a template, and you can even say, let's say that you have like a color or a fill in your SVG, and you want to replace that color with the props.color. So with your SVGR script, you can say, okay, I want to replace this color with props.color. So you don't need to do all these things like manually. And even like if you have a template, you can already have in your template default props, prop types, the name. You can define that if you want to add something to your ID. So let's say I have this project React Kawaii, and I can say like that all the IDs that I want to have like a prefix React Kawaii _ and then the name of the ID.
And then presumably you'd also you'd be able to say add events or like behavior to that SVG then as well once you're in JSX territory, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I saw a talk that you gave, I think was it at React Berlin, and you were demoing using React and SVGs, but also with audio as well. So how did you go about doing the application, and what things did you kind of learn and tricks that you got from that?
Yeah, so I really like music. And for some period of my life, I was like a rapper in Portugal. And so I always liked music. So I think I have this dream that one day I'm going to build something related with music. And so for years, something that motivates me when I create like a design, is it something like related with music? That's why one of my projects was that cassette tape. But all my talks were related only with SVGs. And one day I said, okay, why I'm always just talking about illustration and SVGs? Maybe my illustrations could be related with music. So I said, okay, let me try to explore SVGs and music. What can I do? And then the first thing that came to my mind was like a basic audio player. And normally a basic audio player, you have like a button that when you click play, it can transform in pause. And then you can have like the timer and all of these things. And I was like, okay, the play and the pause can be just the SVG icon. And then you can have like, to see where the time is and the music, you can have like, normally it's just a circle. And I was like, what happened if I replace these elements with more like creative SVGs? And it's like really basic, because the code for a audio player you have everywhere. There's also a lot of plugins and a lot of people teaching how to create a basic audio player with React. So I basically just replaced and one of those codes I replaced like play, I replaced that circle. So I had this speech from Neil Armstrong landing the moon. And I was like, because we're talking about the moon, I'm going to create a player that is related with the moon. So basically the circle that says where is the current time, I replaced with the moon. And it's something very easy with SVGs. You just like create the design and you export it, and then you replace the icons of the audio player.
Now, this is pretty fascinating, because you're right in the sense that if you would have tasked me with building something like this, my first thought would never have been SVG. I would have for sure busted out a million divs. Like that's where I would have started. And CSS, and I would have been frustrated. And I'm actually just I've got the app up here, and it's actually kind of fascinating, and it really makes a lot of sense, and it almost makes me wonder like what other problems we should be thinking of in terms of SVG first, instead of just throwing a million divs in CSS at all of our problems.
Yeah, actually, like I think like that right now, maybe the CSS is more like flexible for UI because if you have like a mobile view or a desktop view, it's maybe easier to transform everything. Like that example of the cassette tape. To make it like responsive, it's basically the cassette that grows and proportionally. So at some point it can get really small and the buttons can get small. So I think for some things, maybe for real UI, it's better to use CSS. But for creative things, if you're going to create something that is really unique, it's better to go with SVG.
So, Elizabeth, maybe you already talked about this, but how did you get into SVGs? Because that, to me, is one of the more intimidating aspects of CSS and HTML and just pretty much web development in general. It's not something that I would just, start playing around with, I guess, in my free time.
Yeah, it was because I decided. So when I quit the events industry, so I was doing like events, and so I finished university. I was working doing these shows, and then the crisis started in Portugal. So people started not going to shows. So at some point, all the money that I was making was from those events. So I didn't have like a good salary at the end of the month because people stopped going to these shows. And I also was like doing music shows, and I ended up not having too many shows. So I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do something. And a lot of my friends, we're really talented doing sites, So I started doing sites, but then basically like WordPress websites, and I was like, yeah, but I have to maybe take a course. And so I decided that I wanted to create mobile apps. So I went to an iOS course, and at the end of the course, I had to create a project. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to create this cassette tape to make like freestyles. So my idea was I would have like the mobile phone with a cassette tape, and every time I wanted to make a freestyle, I would press play and record my freestyle. But then the most frustrating thing at the end of the course is I could do all the code, but the design of the cassette tape with at that time with I think it was Auto Layout, the name of the iOS thing. And so the design was awful, and I found it too complex. And I already knew how to use CSS and how to design, and I was like, my gosh, it was so difficult to create this like with Xcode. And so one day I saw after maybe 2 years, I moved from Lisbon to Dublin. And when I was in Dublin, I just saw my design of that cassette tape for the iOS app. And I was like, maybe now that I know more about front end, maybe I can try to do this again. And then my mind was already thinking, how can I split all these elements in CSS? How can I create this cassette tape with CSS? But then I don't know how, I just saw that SVG was very similar to the HTML. And I was like, what if I export this cassette tape? What if I export as an SVG? And then I try just to animate with JavaScript or CSS. And then I started just trying to animate it. If I press play, I just want to rotate the wheels. And I think it was the first time I tried to use the SVG. And then once I start like animating it so easily, just saying, okay, when I click on this, when I select this ID and on-click, this happen. And it was so easy that, okay, now I can create whatever I want with my imagination. I just have to design it, export it, and that's it.
Sounds so simple when you put it that way.
Yeah.
If you're a front-end developer looking for remote work, then I recommend G2I, a React and React Native focused hiring platform that will connect you directly with their clients that need your skill set. What makes G2I a unique hiring experience is that they spend the time marketing you to their clients of your choice. G2I is a team of engineers that technically vets you up front. If you pass their vetting, their clients have agreed to skip their initial interview process, saving you time and energy getting your next gig. They take care of all the hard work for you so you can get focused on development. To join G2I, go to g2i.co and apply.
So one thing I want to touch upon as well is you've created a library, I think you referenced it earlier, called React Kawaii, and it's basically described as a library of cute SVG illustrations. So how did you go about designing those SVG components and actually building a library around that?
It was mostly because when I moved to Dublin and after I discovered this cassette tape thing, I was working for a startup and it was related with cinema and analytics. So we wanted to make our product like funny, because in cinema you have a lot of things like you can use the Batman or you can have a quote from I don't know, any movie in the world, E.T. or so. We thought, okay, we have to do this more like creative. So we were also working with Alibaba. At the time, it was it was working with us, and Alibaba was like supporting the company. It was called Showtime Analytics, and so the design from Europe, from the design from China, it's a little bit different. And so we start working with some designers and developers from China when they start realizing that they are so creative. You know, they can use like cute things, this type of kawaii illustrations. And in Europe, we are like everything is boring. Like all the apps are similar. It's like we have the same type of buttons everywhere. So at some point, I was, okay, we have to design something like with and put like these cute illustrations. So we start introducing like tickets with a cute face on the tickets, and after that we introduced this type of illustrations. But then the startup was too small, so basically we had like maybe at the time 2 designers, and I was not a real designer at the time. I really wanted to be a designer, but I was like the developer designer. So I was helping the front-end team and sometimes the design team. And we didn't have like enough time to, every time we needed a new design, someone has to create it. So I created like in Sketch with symbols. I put all of these faces, and then my colleague, the other colleague doing design, just had to pick the right face and put on top of the ticket or put on top of the popcorn. And then we were like every time doing the same. So if we needed like a error state and we needed an illustration for error state, basically it was the popcorn with the sad face. If it was a success state, it was the popcorn with the happy face. And so I started realizing this pattern that we are just basically repeating the same type of illustration, exporting over and over again similar illustrations, just changing the face. So I started thinking, what if I put like a if statement inside of the SVG and using with React? So you can say with passing a prop, saying what is the mood, if it's up, it's sad. And then according to that mood, it will get the face. Like if it's sad, it will lower the happy face. If it's sad, it's going to lower the sad face. So I tried to translate that SVGs into a React component. And at the time, I didn't know about SVGR. So all the process was like manual, like exporting. I've created like the face components, and the face component was just receiving that props, the mood props, happy, sad, KO. And then every time we needed a new body, and the body could be a planet, it could be a popcorn, it could be a ticket. And then actually, then I finished the component, and I don't think we start using it a lot because we already had other illustration, and then it was like not a priority. So I put it like the project open source on my GitHub, and it stayed there forever. But one day I just started seeing that I was having a lot of people starting the project, and I was like, oh, what happened? It was, I think, maybe 1 year after I open sourced it. And it was someone from Facebook that discovered and shared it on Twitter. And then I started feeling like all the pressure. Oh my gosh, this is unfinished. A lot of bugs and issues, but then a lot of people start like contributing and actually improving the code, because I was not even optimizing at that time. It was really exporting from Sketch and the if statements inside, and that's it.
Very cool.
Yes. So on that point, actually, it's something I've always wondered about. And as I've looked at libraries like React or other libraries that people build, I mean, when you build your own library and then you actually have it reach a wider audience, how do you go about, planning what next to build in terms of, if somebody has an issue that they raise and it's maybe a feature to add to the SVGs or something, how do you decide, this feature, I'm going to implement it, or this one, I'll maybe leave it for a different time?
Actually, it's difficult to plan what's coming next. I think it's more what people are having problems or issues with. And with React Kawaii, it was people using React Native that start complaining, we can't use. And that was like, okay, I went to Code Sandbox. I saw like a React Native project. And I imported the library and I said, yeah, it works. So I closed the issue.
That works.
Works on my machine.
Yeah. No, it works in code. After some time, someone came again and said, it doesn't work in React Native. And I pointed to the Code Sandbox project. Yeah, but I'm using it. The problem is I never used React Native before. So then someone said, no, it's not working. And I try, to run it like on my local host. And I used something. I think there's now a new project for React Native that is easy to set up. I used something and I actually imported and I couldn't. And I said, why is it not working? That's when I realized the way the SVGs are handled and React Native is different. So there's a different plugin to import the SVGs. So instead of transforming it to the normal React component, I had to transform into a specific type of React component. And actually with the SVGR, you can export as a normal React component or as a React component for React Native. So then, I start first exporting to the normal React component and then search and replace for React Native. But with time, because it starts being it's a little bit difficult to test in React Native. So my last components are not in React Native anymore. Because then I had this goal, I need to create this awesome SVGR script that will transform everything with one command line. It will transform into normal React components in React Native. So now that's what I'm doing because I'm realizing that the manual process, it's not going to work. So that's now the priority. So what I'm doing now, I already have a script working. And it's not the best script ever. It's a lot of if statements. But
the best kind.
Yes.
Right.
A lot of exceptions. I believe if a real developer is going to see my script, he's going to say, well, we should use the switch or something. But it's working for now.
At the end of the day, all apps are basically just a whole bunch of if statements. That's really all we're actually doing at the end of the day.
Yeah. And if it works, don't mess with it.
Yeah, exactly.
I recall the first time I actually looked at the React code base, the source code, and then I got to the part where they were trying to handle between different, I think it was the component types. And it's basically like a whole list of if this, and I thought, yes, at least I know that it's been used by React, so I'm good as well if I use it in my code as well.
It's good enough for the entire React team. It's good enough for us.
Yeah. Working with my colleagues, I'm in a design team. It's like the Kibana design and the Elastic UI design team, and we have two developers. real developers, and then we have this type of designers that we are designers, we can code, but we're not considered engineers, let's say. And sometimes it's so difficult to me when I have to grab the code of the real engineers. I'm like, what is it doing? It's much easier to understand the code of a colleague that is like a designer, because it's easy to see, oh, if this happening, yeah. And the other has a lot of abstractions and things that you're like, oh my gosh, what is it doing?
No, I know what you mean. I think like one trap I think people that have been coding for a long time is you sort of value cleverness over readability. Mm-hmm. And I've certainly fallen into that trap. And it's funny, as you were mentioning the React code base. So I used to be involved in the jQuery project. And looking at the jQuery source code, one thing that whoever worked on this, and it's a variety of people at this point, absolutely loved nested ternary statements. So all over the jQuery source code, you'd see like if, this equals this, but then it becomes an absolute catastrophe of question marks and colons everywhere. And it's totally unintelligible. And I mean, I've been writing JavaScript code for over a decade, and I'm looking at this and going, I have absolutely no clue what's going on here. So it is kind of interesting to hear your perspective, because I've certainly experienced this as well, where people it's a common trap. And I think in a way, React almost enables it a little bit too, because you can be very clever with React, but sometimes we don't think about the next person looking at that line of code that we write, because sometimes it can be a complete bunch of nonsense too.
Yeah, ES6 is enabling it as well, especially with some of the new stuff that they're adding, like, optional field definitions. And yeah, it's getting less and less readable if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, even though I use them a fair bit in my own coding, I don't really like arrow functions. I prefer like the old-fashioned function name, open brackets, do your stuff, as opposed to like this whole concise and very one-line coding style that's coming into JS.
Yeah, sometimes just assigning, like trying to do something in one line of code, sometimes it's a lot easier to create a variable, because then even like that variable's name can make the code more readable, even if the variable's technically unnecessary. Just like little things like that, things that are more verbose oftentimes can help quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But it's easy to fall into the trap. I've done it. I've wrote totally unintelligible code. I think all of us have at some point.
So Elizabet, I was wondering, do you have a lot of opportunities at your current position to use SVGs? Because I know for my team, at least, we probably have like less than 5 in our entire application. The rest are just icons or little JPEGs and PNGs that our design team helps make for us.
Yeah. Actually, every time I start like a new job, I have this thing in mind that try to do basic things. And so I had this in mind, I'm not going to start creating these weird illustrations and creating like unnecessary things. But my manager starts saying, why don't you... I remember the first empty state that I created for Kibana. It was so boring because I was following what was already there. So I just put like the text and the button, a call to action. And my manager, you can maybe be more creative with your own style. Okay, I try. I just put like an icon from the design system, the text and the button. And I went, it's a little bit better, but don't worry if you want to. So after some months, I finally start putting kawaiis. So my last empty state, I was trying to explain what is like index pattern and Elasticsearch. And I was, transforming a database into index pattern. So I created like a database and an arrow and what I thought, this is an index pattern. And then everyone, this is not, I think what you put as an index pattern should be the database, and the database should be the index patterns. And then I was like, okay, what can I do to improve this illustration? So then I put like planets React Kawaii, that is the planets, and the database, and the planet is like flying in between the database. And then everyone was like, oh, now it's better. But now it doesn't mean anything. So I think and then for another application called Graph, I also start putting like illustrations and animating the illustrations. And then I just use when you're like creating normal icons. And I think that's the only places where we're using like SVGs is for illustrations and for icons.
Cool. So, are there any other things you think are important to know about SVGs and how we can use them besides what you've already covered so far?
Oh, yeah, I think they're great for illustrations. I think I saw that a lot of websites still using PNGs, or even if they use SVG, they import as an image. They don't use the SVG inline. And if you use the SVG inline, it's so easy then to grab like an ID or an element. And with a little bit of CSS, you can like rotate or create a small animation or even like on over. Instead of going on over and maybe apply like to scale all the image, you can just scale a few elements. So it creates much more like unique illustrations and animations and UI things. Yeah, I go to a lot of websites and I just see like first like these PNGs, sometimes not even like with the best quality. Even if you import SVG as an image instead of being inline, even this way you will have better quality because it's like a vector image.
When I first started taking computer science classes in college, I thought programming was just a joke. In fact, I changed my major over to engineering and started doing computer engineering and chip design. Then I found Ruby and I fell in love. I love Ruby. It was my first real programming language where I dove deep and really learned how to make software that makes a difference for other people. Since then, and the way that we got started with devchat.tv, we started a show called Ruby Rogues. It's currently in the 400s of episodes. We've talked to hundreds of people in the Ruby community, about the Ruby programming language, about Rails, and about what makes good programming. So if you're interested in Ruby Rogues, or you just want to hear a long series of experienced programmers talking about real problems, then go check out rubyrogues.com.
All right, cool. So if everyone's okay, shall we go to picks? All right, TJ, want to go up first?
Sure. Yeah, I can go first. I think I've been watching, so Paige, I think you picked this a few weeks ago, but Tiger King on Netflix. It's a show that I sort of resisted watching because I didn't think I would like it. And I totally got way into it and had to watch the whole thing. So it's one of those things that I feel like now you sort of have to watch it to appreciate the memes and the internet culture that's built up around it. So we marathoned through it and it was surprisingly entertaining. So that's my pick for this week.
Awesome. Paige?
Sure. I came across this really cool color palette generator when I was fiddling around this past weekend. It's called coolors.com. So COOLORS.com. It's just a really neat way to come up with color palettes that you generate based on, just kind of a random generator. And as you come across colors that you like, you can save them and lock them down and then use the generator to keep finding more complementary colors. Or you can look at the 1.5 million palettes that other people have already made. So if you're like looking to, I guess, design a new website or just see some really nicely designed color schemes, I'd highly recommend it. It's free to use. It's really easy to get started. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. So my pick for this week is a drawing app called Excalibur. And I love it because I do a fair bit of blogging. And sometimes when I do write articles, I like to explain things using images. And it's really simple to use. Just basically can draw flow charts or any kind of animations. And I think it's actually the source is in React as well. So if you want to, you can actually go to the repo and add any pull requests or add any features you want to see in the app. So yeah, it's really handy for kind of sketching out flow charts, like I said, or if you want to kind of explain something using images, again, it's good for that. Elizabeth, have you got any picks for us this week?
Yeah, maybe I can pick a conference that is going to happen, and it's the womenofreact.com, and and I help with the design, so I'm not actually like involved in the organization itself. I just help, and I think it's going to be a real good conference, and it's really cool to see a lot of women together doing this, and it's totally free, and it's something that I'm going to watch, and that's cool.
It's very on brand that all of these things are SVGs, and pretty awesome design too. Like the first thing I did is like started to inspect them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, when I create that, I did like the design, and I was each card should be like a React component, but a functional component. And when we are like implementing the design, it was Sarah and Rachel implementing, and they didn't put export const everywhere. They thought it was just an example on my design. And I was, no, the idea is we have to put that export const. And actually then, Dan Abramov from the React team, he went to the website and he did like a pull request, fixing a few errors that we had in our components. Because, like, for instance, export const woman of React, we didn't notice, and it was like the word separated, women of React, and then, no, it should be. So it really took.
Awesome.
And it was funny. And next time we should have like a design link. Yeah.
Cool. So if anybody wants to find you online, where can they find you? Twitter, website? What links can they go to?
I think more like Twitter. Actually, it's funny because my previous job, I was contacted on Twitter. And then I realized that I didn't have my email anywhere. And so someone like, I was trying to send you an email, and I was okay. So I think the best way to contact is actually Twitter, LinkedIn. I know that people hate LinkedIn, but that's a good way for contacting.
So I'll put your Twitter handle in the show notes for anybody who wants to kind of get in touch and talk to you about SVGs or anything else about your work. So cool. So thank you so much for your time today, and take care.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.